Let's not ask space, which is the furthest thing away that we can speak to, where we are down here.
So we've talked about like commerce. This is an incredible problem where if we don't have GPS, like things start grinding to a halt. I mean, even just getting here, right?
Not only does it limit the technology we can employ today, but it doesn't allow for everything that we need to do. In order for that to happen on this front, to disrupt something like GPS that's everywhere, we have to perform better and be cooler. Mm-hmm.
This week's podcast is really cool. I've known both of these entrepreneurs for about a decade. Brett was actually one of the first investors in my counter UAS company, and he found the problem set that is really interesting and really affects everything we do in our life, which is a reliance on GPS. Shaun has already built and sold a company in the facial recognition space, and they basically met each other. Brett explained the problem set. Shaun's a technical genius, and he brought himself and a team over to help actually take something from an idea into a product that they're now actively deploying around the world. I think you're really going to enjoy today's conversation because it shows you how just because we've done something the same way for 50 years doesn't mean it's what we need to be doing moving forward. All right. So guys, thanks for joining me today on the podcast. Why don't you guys just take a second and introduce yourself and, what you're building?
Brett Harrison, co-founder and president of Tern AI. I've known Dan for a while and friends with Shaun before we started this.
Yeah. And what were you doing before Tern AI, Brett?
How far back do you want me to go?
You can go as far back as you want, man. You have a very interesting journey, and I think people like to hear about it.
Yeah. So started in the special operations community. After leaving that, really had a pretty solid amount of options. Decided to look into the field of the individuals that I knew that were the richest, which was all real estate development. Mm-hmm. So joined a real estate development company in Las Vegas. Incredible opportunity, really. Got to cut my teeth in business doing that, understanding contracting, understanding all of the complexities that come really with business. Did well enough there to start investing on my own. Invested in a blockchain infrastructure company and a startup out of San Diego called Citadel.
A counter UAS company.
UAS company did very, very well. Did some cool stuff. But left the real estate development company to become COO of the blockchain infrastructure company. Had a nice experience there, taking it all the way into a multi-billion-dollar merger, and then a follow-on listing on the NASDAQ. Left there, and right around that time, 2021-ish, understood that the threat to domestic economic health and military operations globally with the GPS denied likelihood in those environments becoming so strong, it was the time to launch Tern. So knew Shaun socially, and he would have been the top choice in the world, really, to join me on this. He'll go into it, but he created the fastest facial recognition software in the world. And so we needed that type of intelligence and that type of speed and efficiency in code to move forward. So it was born.
Tern was born. I want to hear Shaun's story next, and then we'll talk about where the idea for Tern came from, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So got my entrepreneurial start really over in North Africa and Morocco. And I had left my corporate job at Merrill Lynch to kind of embark on this new life, really. This is back in 2011, 12. And at the time, I would come across a paper from the FBI that they were transitioning their criminal holdings from fingerprint to facial recognition. So that's a really interesting move for the government and a really big investment. And so idea went off in our head, okay, how can we monetize facial recognition? How can we be part of this movement? And it was right around the time where Kickstarter and those types of kind of fund your product before it's built platforms were launching and had some success. And also around the time that sensors and the smart home were becoming popular. So the idea of taking facial recognition and putting it on a camera that could then recognize you as you enter a building, enter your home, and personalize that space for you. I'd say it was probably 10 years too early. Because we're starting to see that happen now.
Right.
But what it did was it gave us a really good path into facial recognition. So by licensing the top 3 providers in the world, we were able to see very intimately what the gaps were in their software. And at the time, the training data available was largely celebrity data sets, very skewed in one direction. And so performance on a global population was very low. And we had manufacturing facilities down in Magy in Colombia, and we would have our test devices to enter the manufacturing facilities, enter the co-working space, and the solutions we were licensing did not work well on that population of people. So there's got to be something to this. We kind of went through the traditional startup cycle of we were up to 16 people, raised some funding, and got to a point where there were 8 investors in the US that were investing in hardware, had kind of placed their early bets.
Yeah.
and Ring had just gone from Doorbot to Ring. And so we were competing directly with them for space in the smart home. And so we struggled with funding, even though we had a couple $100,000 in orders globally. And ultimately had to make a decision of, do we shut the company down and move on? Or do we reposition, into software where we know the gaps? So I went from 16 people down to 3 people, rebranded the company as TrueFace, and set out to be the best facial recognition provider in the world. At the time, there was a strategic decision to be made was, do you want to have the most accurate or the fastest solution? It was our hypothesis that accuracy would eventually be a commodity. If the data was available, we would eventually get our hands on it and be accurate. Speed is where we could differentiate. And so, early on in the algorithmic design process, we optimized for speed. Ultimately, that was the right decision. Grew that company up to profitability right before we sold. We sold to PMG out of DC, a government contractor, in 2021. And at the time, we were the fastest facial recognition software in the world. Could scan through 1 billion faces a second, so population of the Earth in under 10 seconds. So, the whole journey was a lot of ups and downs, running out of cash, going from 16 people down to 3 people, not an easy thing to do. Ultimately back up to 25 people in, successful exit for the entire team.
Yeah. I mean, that journey has got to be incredible, but it also is just like kind of what every entrepreneur goes through, right? Where you think you're going to go down this path and then you end up over here, right? So how did you guys link up and start Tern? Brett was alluding to like the problem that GPS has in our society because we're kind of over reliant on it, right?
Yeah, sure. So a mutual friend of ours got married, and we met on his bachelor party.
Nice. We're all great business ideas start.
Exactly.
3 a.m.
in New Orleans on the street.
Yeah. Actually, it was the 2 of us were left at like 3 a.m. and we did a
scorpion
shot, and I think that sealed it.
Yeah. Ta-da.
Right. But really, when we were in Afghanistan as part of a task force, it was often the case that during sections of the operation that were relatively delicate, we would lose GPS. And just like a consumer would when going through a tunnel or in and out of a parking garage, it's because it's triangulation based and signal based. You're not immune to that as a SEAL platoon. SEAL platoons still have the same issues with signal that everybody else does. And actually potentially more because of the complex situations that were put in. And so it became very clear that the signal was the problem. We would if we weren't relying on the signal, being in mountains, being in valleys, jamming, spoofing, all of that would not be a factor. And so when leaving the Navy, thought about that as a business case because it doesn't just affect the military; it affects everybody. And GPS being 50 years old, and really just an incumbent technology that everyone takes for granted. We're at a point in society now where the technology that's coming out today in 2025 is limited by GPS. Just the easiest example is Uber. I think everyone listening to this and everyone in this room has had an instance where either the Uber has tried to pick you up at the wrong spot, they can't find you, or even worse, when you're out, there's a GPS delay and they take a wrong turn, they got to loop back around. That's just an easy example of Uber not being able to perform their service the way that they want to because of the limitation of GPS. But I think it's applicable across the board. So now is the time to do that and do it in a way that no one else has, which is to really intelligently understand where you are, just like almost a person would. So like I know I'm in this building. Why? Because I perceived my arrival here. I watched my arrival, and I can turn around and I can look at the distinguishing features, and so I know where I am. That's effectively how we decided to solve the problem. Is let's not ask space, which is the furthest thing away that we can speak to, where we are down here. So, identified all of that, decided to move forward in that path, and really thought about the way to make sure it's done in the most innovative and best way possible. And so, reach out to Shaun and said, "Hey, this is what we're thinking. We think it's the right way to address this problem. Everyone else is going different type of signal, or heavy on the physical infrastructure side. Let's launch more. Let's launch more satellites. Let's just do them a little bit lower, or let's put up beacons. Like they did back in the 40s for additional radio towers. Said let's do this differently." And so had a lot of discussions with him on the applicability of some of our concepts.
Sure.
And then I think it clicked, at least I'm going to speak for him for a second. I think it clicked for all of us, saying this is real. This is something worth going. And so we went all in.
Drone Wars is recorded from Firestorm's global headquarters in San Diego, California. Each episode is filmed inside our X-Cell, a modular industrial-grade manufacturing facility designed to be deployed anywhere in the world within 24 hours for on-demand drone production. Each week on the podcast, we bring you cutting-edge insights from unmanned industry leaders. Listen as they share the breakthroughs and technologies they're working on, the hard lessons they've learned, and the bold predictions about what the next 5 to 10 years in unmanned systems and advanced manufacturing have in store for us. Enjoying the show so far? Then be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now back to the show. So talk to us a little bit maybe about how the product works today and where you guys want it to go in the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah, I'd first start by saying I think what was exciting to me was the approach. So when you look at the way GPS has evolved in 50 years, it really hasn't. But the ancillary technologies around it are meant to try to improve the signal, go from the L1 to the L5 band, chips and phones that are supposedly more resilient. You don't see anyone that's truly taking a unique perspective or a unique approach to say, let's assume that the signal does not exist. If that does not exist, how do we solve this problem? So, when Brett and I were talking about it early on, that stuck out to me as truly transformational. When you can take an entirely fresh perspective on an industry and totally disrupt their way of doing things. And so, instead of kind of incremental advancements in technology, you're going from 0 to 1 very, very quickly. So it's very exciting. And in early conversations, we said, okay, is this applicable to the DoD, to the entire country? Where does this fit?
Right.
And I think the initial thought process was DoD. That's kind of what we know and what we can help with.
Right.
As we uncovered who is reliant upon GPS for position, navigation, timing, we realized, wow, this is a much larger issue than we thought. The entire economy is a single point of failure for the entire economy. We've heard a couple of numbers turn around, but the one that sticks is if there was an outage, it would cost the U.S. economy $1.2 billion a day. But roughly 1.3 trillion transact amongst GPS on a daily basis. So significant impact if there was something to happen. So when we set out to solve the problem, no signal being foundational principle number one. Number two is it has to work within the confines of technology today that we have. So no $1 million, towers here, there, and everywhere. We need to be able to use these sensors in vehicles, a phone, and some sort of navigational brain or proprietary AI that can make sense of the information. So we're taking existing vehicle sensors, existing digital maps, and then using our patented and proprietary AI to make sense of that, determine position and location, and provide that as a lat-long output.
Yeah. And so I've been tracking this for a while. I mean, tell us some of the distances you guys are now moving without relying on GPS. I think it's quite impressive.
Yeah. As far as we're aware, we've traveled the furthest in the world without any type of GNSS check-in while continuously providing position. So many groups will tout a few miles, less than 10 typically. The greatest we've heard is 6.2 miles. But we've gone over 150 just in average testing. And then our third co-founder, Phil, is going to do a cross-country journey this summer.
Cool.
Going across the United States, running it the whole time. So there's no time and distance limitation like dead reckoning or sensor fusion, typical solution would have. So that's something that's a real breakthrough in terms of the ability to position without signal.
Yeah. So let's just talk about like the threat to not having GPS for a minute, right? Brett, when I was doing the Citadel stuff, we had a bunch of sensors in the Middle East, and when the Russians showed up to a certain country, all of a sudden our boxes started showing, like saying they were in the middle of the Mediterranean or in Africa or in Egypt, right? This is 2017, 2018. They were aggressively spoofing and jamming. And I remember going to NSW and be like, what are you guys going to do about this? They said, we'll never fight the Russians. Okay. So it's not a problem, right? And now we look at Syria. You cannot fly a drone. You cannot drive a drone. You cannot move a drone on the water with GPS, full stop, right? Like, how much of a threat do you guys think that is in the military sense? We've talked about like commerce. This is an incredible problem where if we don't have GPS, like things start grinding to a halt. I mean, even just getting here, right? I've never been to this location in Austin and I had to use a GPS, with Google Maps to get here. So talk about it. Let's talk about the military side of this for a minute.
I'd start by saying it would be illogical to think that any conflict moving forward, you have access to GPS.
Mm-hmm. That's now table stakes.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Correct. Whether you're the Taliban, you can buy it on Alibaba and jam that way, or you can be a more sophisticated nation state and really do some damage. But either way, you should make the assumption that you're not going to have it. Mm-hmm. But the question then becomes, how do you prepare for it? And what do you do? Mm-hmm. And I think from our perspective, it's really our thesis that GPS providing position, navigation, and timing worked up until now. Mm-hmm. But now that things are getting more sophisticated, kind of as I alluded to before, not only does it limit the technology we can employ today, but it doesn't allow for everything that we need to do. Mm-hmm. And so you have to break the P, the N, and the T apart. And that's what we see the Department of Transportation doing. They're already understanding and moving forward with different solutions for the timing component than they would the positioning component. Mm-hmm. And even you break that down, now we have a sophisticated enough solution for the ground, which may be tailored and effective enough for that, but it might not apply to the aircraft. But where we're going to evolve, I think, is the disaggregation of this service to more tailored and better solutions. That's the key thing is that I think that they're better when they're implemented. Yeah. So like right now when we're driving in the vehicle and we're running GPS side by side, you see GPS move all over the place. And we don't. We're very tight in that sense. And so in a direct comparison, in a vehicle on the ground, one performs better than the other. Mm-hmm. And I think as some of these other solutions get in place because they are tailored, they are developed now, they're smarter, they're better, they're faster, they're more intricate, they're going to do a better job. But for the military use case, I think we're just going to need to layer in these solutions. Mm-hmm. A drone may have and should have a different solution than a tank.
Mm-hmm.
I think to add there too, as the future of conflict evolves, autonomy is a very big piece of that, and autonomous convoys, autonomous resupplies. And with a solution like ours, you can send those convoys into motion knowing that they'll get to their destination with no issue. You can't do that today with GPS. So, the other thing to mention too is we've spent 50 years as a country developing GPS, tens of billions of dollars. We were able to replicate that, perform better for significantly less money. Mm-hmm. And so, as you look at the scalability of this technology, we don't need that infrastructure. We don't need to spend $10 billion. We've got something that can be scaled to tactical vehicles today.
So you guys have raised a little bit of money. Well, a good seed round, right? Where do you guys want to take the technology over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, so the goal of the company since day one has always been we want to be in every vehicle on the road. Mm-hmm. It's a big goal, but we do think it's achievable. And so, we're working towards that. The off-road environment is something that we're very interested in. The maritime environment we're very interested in. And so we're spending resources now to develop the R&D pathway for those different use cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're really the only complementary or alternate PNT group that's been rigorously tested for providing position on the U.S. road network through the DOT and Volpe Center. They really did a fantastic job of throwing scenarios at us that are complex and edge cases to make sure that the testing was done significantly. And so with that, we do hope that this can end up in mass adoption, because it's, as Shaun mentioned, that we had a couple key pillars within the company. We can't sacrifice on the signal side, but then also making it easy and scalable to actually implement. That's the key thing. And as Tesla was very smart in the way that they approached the disruption of the automotive industry, because prior to their mass entry into the market, electric vehicles were not cool. They were rather dorky, not fun. No one really wanted them. They were interested in the fact that they didn't provide carbon emissions, but that's about it. There was nothing else there. Yeah. Until Elon came along and said it has to perform better and be cooler. Yep. And so, in order for that to happen on this front, to disrupt something like GPS that's everywhere, we have to perform better and be cooler. Mm-hmm. And what I mean on the cooler side as it relates to us is being able to, actually get out there at scale, get into cars, provide something meaningful to everyone. So next time you get into an Uber, you don't have the issues that we discussed. Or if you're someone on the battlefield, just trying to get to your target area without hitting the IEDs that you're trying to avoid, you can do that and rely on it. And so that's really the goal, is to allow the advancement of this entire issue for everybody.
They came back to us and said, "We've got a couple $1 million and a great team, some of the brightest people in the world. We're gonna build it ourselves." I said, "Cool, okay, great." So about a year later, they called back and said we were unable to do so.
Correct.
So there's not always like, "Hey, I'm right, you're wrong." It's like, let's let the best decision win.
So let's say 50% of the decisions you make are right, but at a big company, maybe you get to make 2 decisions a day. So you're only making 1 correct decision a day.
Mm-hmm. No one was really aware that you could do this without signal.
What it took the government a long time and billions of dollars to take a dot and move it across a map as you drive your car in real time. And we did that in a year.
Thanks for listening to the Drone Wars podcast. Each week, we bring you fascinating conversations with leaders shaping the future of air, sea, land, and space technologies. Catch new episodes every Tuesday wherever podcasts can be found. Until then, we'll see you next time.